All right, good morning and afternoon for the next class. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining me again in week 3 in the statistics course. So today we will be talking about descriptive statistics and introduction to SPSS. But before we get into the core of the descriptive statistics, which are mean, variance, we will start by talking about organizing the data as well as visualizing it. We might not get into visualizing the data more than organizing the data because I think organizing the data, getting to know how to get around with large data set is more important than visualizing it. Of course, when you need to present your data to your stakeholders, to the users of your data set, it's very important to visualize it, visualizing it in such a way that is entertaining as well as informative. But before you get to be able to do so, you need to know how to organize the data set. So you have to switch your mind. You have to think about that at one point you might use not a small data set with consisting of 10, 20 people, but you need to think that you might play around with 100 or even 1,000 people in your data set. So how to get around with such large data set. So this is how we will, today we will be talking more about that. Okay. So, but before, how are you? I hope everyone is holding up in the statistics course. I know it's getting more and more intense, but I think it's I am pretty sure that you will get past all these materials. Oh, by the way, it's not week 3, but it's week 4. My mistake. All right, so let's go. So the overview of the meeting is the descriptive statistics, which is part 1. Part 2, next week we will be talking about mean, variance, median, etc. But today we will be talking about frequency, percentage. We will be talking about relative frequency. We will be talking about how to determine a class width interval and so on. And we will start getting to know in SPSS at the very beginning level, but I think it will be opening up a lot of things to you. And what to expect next week, that is some exercises again, and also be prepared for quiz, either next week or in the next 2 weeks. Okay, so before we get to our material, let's start with a survey, right? Because after all, when we talk about statistics, we talk about survey, and when we talk about survey, you might be involving some kind of questionnaire. So I have prepared a little scale. So this is a mini perceived stress scale. It has been modified to adjust to our class. So I would like you to pick a pen and paper or pencil, or even you wanna put down your answer on your cell phone or tablet, whatever it is, but as long as you answer all these questions. So this is a stress scale, only 4 items. So each item consisting a question which you need to answer. And the way you answer it is by choosing whether it never occurs, almost never occurs, sometimes occurs, fairly often, and finally very often. So it starts from 0 to 4. So for instance, for number 1, in the last month, how often have you felt that you were unable to control the important things in your life? And when you say very often, then so you should put down number 4 in your answer sheet. All right, so let's do this in 2 minutes. Yeah, I think you can always pause the video and then do it on your own. So let's continue. Okay, let's put that aside for a moment. Now, let's get back to the material. So organizing and visualizing data. There are 5 steps to examine a large amount of data and reach conclusions on those data sets. First, you have to define the variables that you want to study in order to solve a business problem or meet a business objective. Or it's not just about business, or it's also about your material, international relations. It's about the variables that you're interested in. For instance, I was interested in the level of stress during the pandemic. So if we get back to the previous slide, my variable is stress, right? Variable, again, is something that you want to measure, is something that you want to investigate, is something that you are interested uh, in calculating. So first, you have to define the variables. In this case, um, the stress level is my variable. Collect the data from appropriate sources. So if I'm interested in the level of stress during the pandemic among university students, so then in order to collect the data from appropriate sources is by collecting from university students, by asking them uh, these certain types of items. And then the third one is organizing the data collected by developing tables. What we mean by these tables are contingency tables, frequency tables, and we will get to them in a second. But organizing the data, meaning we might involve some kind of creating a table which might be easier for us to read and to interpret and eventually to come to some kind of conclusion. And then the fourth one is visualizing the data by developing charts. This is what I meant by organizing and visualizing. Once you organize the data, it's very easy for you to visualize. That's why I am not getting into visualizing it so much, because I think the most important thing and the way you start is by organizing it. So we will delve more into organizing. And finally, analyzing the data using appropriate tables and charts. Once you have compiled the large data set, let's say 1,000 respondents with 10 items. So that means what? 10,000 observations. You in a table, if you manage to compile them in one table or in several tables, then it's very easy for you to pinpoint which are the most important things, which are the specific things that you would like to focus on. And in that way, you are able to analyze much more efficient. All right, so we can present our results using the following ways. First, the summary table. I think we have seen all these kind of tables so often in our life. So for instance, table 1 is types of bill payment. The form of payment is by cash, by check, by electronic, or online, and some other method of payment. And let me just using annotate. So this is the form of payment, the method of payment that people use. And so this is the variable that we are talking about, right? So your question would be, what kind of payment that people use in order to pay their bills? That's, for instance, that's your research question. And so the variable is actually the method of payment. And this is the data from the methods of payment among people that you have asked. The percentage is 15% through cash, 54% by check, 28% by electronic or online, and the rest is by some other kind of payment. So it's very easy, right? Obviously, when we talk about percentage, the total here should be 100%. So that's pretty straightforward. The summary table, it's quite easy. Now let's move on to another type. There you go. It's what we call the contingency table. What is a contingency table? It's the intersection of the rows. The contingency table is basically using two information and compile them in one table so that there will be an intersection between those two information, which might be interesting enough. So that interaction is what we call cell. So here, this is a cell. This is a cell, and this is a cell. The cell is the intersection of the rows and columns and consists of the data that we are interested in. And each contains a value associated with a unique pair of responses, a unique pair of those two information. For instance, this is the contingency table that we are looking at right now, displaying type of fund and whether a fee is charged. So if you are looking at intermediate government fund and whether there is a fee charge, the type 1, intermediate government, fee charge, yes. So there are 34 counts. So 34 instances or 34 responses that involve with intermediate government, and there is fee charge. But there is intermediate government that is not being charged. How many? There are 53 responses. And the second type of fund is short-term corporate, and the fee is charged. Yes, there are 20 responses. No fee, 77 responses. So if you look at it, the row is that goes horizontal, and column is that goes vertical. If you look at the row here, all the regardless of the fee. So if you're looking at the row total, so you will be focusing simply just this type, regardless of the fee is being charged or no. So the intermediate government type of fund is there are 87 responses. And if you're looking at the row, at the column, so whether the fee, so you focus on this, the column only, regardless of the type of fund, whether the fee is charged or no, the fee is being charged. So there are 54 in total, and no, there are 130 responses in total. In summary, there are 184 responses, which is classified in all these 4 cells. There you go. So that's how you read contingency table. And again, I think you might have seen this so many times in your life, but we are just making it aware that this is what we call contingency table. And this is very, very useful because no matter how advanced your statistics skills are, contingency table is still used. So no matter how highly calculated your statistics techniques are, still contingency table is still being used either for presenting the data as well as calculating some kind of statistical analysis. All right, so that's how you look at the contingency table. And like I said earlier, there are two information being compiled in one table, and therefore there are rows information here. There are row information, row, and there are column information, yeah, whether yes or no. So this is column that goes vertical and row that goes horizontal. Okay, now this sounds straightforward, but it can be a little tricky. So you need to get a little used to reading this kind of table. So let's continue with here. So the contingency table displaying type of fund based on percentage of overall total is this. So what does it mean by based on percentage of overall total? So your denominator is this. So let's say in the first table, we have 34. And in order to get the percentage of this cell, 34 divided by 148. So if you have your calculator at your hand, we can calculate that 34 divided by 148 is 18.48%, right? The same thing, we can do it again for this cell, intermediate government fund and no fee being charged. There are 53 responses, so 53 divided by 184, that is 28.80. There you go, you got this. And you continue doing that until you fill all the cells with percentage. So that's what we mean by based on percentage of overall total. But there are instances where you don't want to see the overall total. You want to see, you want to focus on the column information, or you want to focus on the row information. For instance, I want to focus on the row information here. I want to focus on how many percentage that people use intermediate government type of fund. So what we look at is, again, we go back to our first table here. Here, there are 34 intermediate government type of fund. In total, there are 87. So what you, in order to fill the cell here based on row total, so instead of 34 divided by 184, we should divide 34 by 87. So again, you just go to your calculator, 34 divided by 87, you will come up with 39.08%, right? And again, the same thing goes for the second cell, 53 here. Instead of 53 divided by 184, 53 divided by 184. That will give you 53 divided by 87. That will give you 60.92%. So that's what we mean by percentage of row total. Again, you see the difference very, very clearly here. Now, the denominator is based on the row total. If you look at the percentage of row total, and the denominator of the overall total is the total number of all responses, regardless of row or column information. Now, the same thing goes for if you want to look at the percentage of column total. So instead of this responses divided by this total number of responses, what you do is for the column total, this responses, here you go. This responses is divided by this responses. Okay. So again, let's prove if we're right or wrong. There are 34 responses, and in total there are 54 responses with the information of a fee being charged. So 34 divided by 54. So it will give you 62.96%. And there you go. There you have it, 62.96%. And again, continue applying the same principle to fill in all this information. So that's contingency table. Again, this is something that you might have seen many times before, but we are just making it aware. Oh, this is what we call contingency table, and there are different types of information. There are two information being compiled into one table, and so we are able to look at, focus on the row total only, or on the column total only, or the complete data set, the whole set of data. So that's contingency table. So first we have the summary table, which is very straightforward, and the contingency table. So the difference between contingency and summary table is summary table, you only have one information. But in the contingency table, you have two information compiled into one table. Okay, now this is the exercise. Go ahead, take your time,